Retching filled the hollow silence of the hall. A wet, metallic sound tore through the air as Inspector Thorne lay on his hands and knees, clawing at the stone floor. He watched oily mercury spill from his own mouth. It soaked into his white silk collar, staining the fabric forever. He choked. He gasped. His eyes rolled back until only the whites remained. This was the end he had feared. This was the rot of 100 years finally coming home. Then, the vision vanished. Reality returned with the slam of a white ceramic boot onto Caelen's hand. The bone did not just break, it splintered. Rusted iron teeth from the floor grate bit into the meat of Caelen's fingers. Thorne did not lift his foot. He did not move. He simply stood there, driving his full weight into the shattered knuckles. Side to side, he twisted his heel until the ceramic scraped directly against the bone underneath. "Do not move, trash can." Thorne's voice cut through the hum of the fans, dry and cold. "You are leaking on the floor again. Do you have any idea what it costs to clean a single tile in this sector? It costs more than your whole life. It costs more than the life of everyone you have ever known in the mud below." Silence met the pain. No scream left Caelen's lips. His throat remained packed with the filth. This bitter sludge of dark thoughts and hidden shames from the rich pumped into his spine through thousands of needles. They remained locked into his bone, buzzing with a low electric heat. Black mercury leaked from his tear ducts. The oil ran down his pale face and sizzled against the industrial salt on the floor. Loud and constant, the fans hummed high above. The abrasion zone existed for one reason. It was the place where the elite sent their mental garbage, and Caelen was the bin. Thorne reached out his hand. A servant in a mask placed a crystal glass in it. The glass was cold. It contained pure water. In the world outside, that one glass was worth 10 years of a man's labor. Thorne did not drink a drop. He turned the glass over. He did it slowly. The freezing water hit Caelen's head. It mixed with the black oil on his skin. It hissed. It bubbled. Foul smoke rose from Caelen's hair, stinging his eyes and burning his lungs. "You look wrong, Caelen," Thorne sneered. He leaned down, bringing the scent of expensive soap and ozone into the mud. "I spent all morning dumping my boredom into you. It was a heavy load today. I had a long weekend. Do not spill a drop of it. If you leak, I will pull your brain out of your skull and sell it for scrap. You are a bucket, Caelen. Buckets do not talk. They do not feel. They just hold the trash until they are full." Laughter echoed from the observation deck. The elite sat in their clean white suits, clutching crystal glasses of wine. Through the thick glass, they watched the scene below. To them, it was just a broken machine being tested for durability. "Look at the reject," a woman laughed. A diamond on her neck flashed with a cold light. "He is shaking. Look at him tremble. Does he not know how lucky he is? He gets to hold the inspector's waist. He gets to be part of something pure. That is the only use for a life like his. He should be thanking the inspector for the gift of this burden." Thorne smiled. It was a small, cruel pull of the lips. He delivered a sharp kick to Caelen's ribs. Caelen skidded across the salt. His body hit the metal cooling pipes with a heavy thud. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, but Caelen did not wait for help. He did not ask for mercy. With his crushed hand, Caelen reached for a red-hot wire sticking out of his neck. He gripped it. He ripped it out with a wet snap. He did not flinch. He just shoved a fresh frozen tube into the raw socket. Under his translucent skin, blue sparks jumped. Caelen did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Thorne. His eyes remained locked on the red code flickering at the bottom of his vision. Sin debt. 99.98%. "Almost there," Thorne said. He walked over to the wall and watched the gold bar glow. It was the meter for his promotion. It was his ticket to the top of the world. "One more surge, Caelen. One more push of my hate, and I become a high architect. I become a god in the white zone. And you go into the furnace. You get turned into ash, just like the rest of the trash in Section 404. Thorne walked to the red desk. His finger hung over the big button. The air in the room grew heavy. The lights flickered. The fans began to scream. The final moment of the transfer had arrived. Thorne looked at the ceiling and laughed. He was ready to be clean forever. The red button vanished under the pressure of Thorne's thumb. Into the console he drove his entire weight, a grunt of savage joy escaping his lips. A scream tore through the room, but no human throat produced it. Within a single second, the heavy steel pipes turned white with frost. Then, they glowed a dull, angry red. Steam hissed from the metal joints. Into the neural bridge surged the syndet, the oily rot of Thorne's own soul moving through the wires. Caelen's body jumped. His spine snapped tight. Inside his back, a bone cracked with a dry pop. Purple light crawled under his skin, jagged and hungry. Every lie Thorne had ever told, every bribe he had taken, and every drop of his cold pride poured into Caelen's brain. Molten lead filled his ears. His mind tore into pieces. Against the glass of the control booth, Thorne pressed his face. Wide and bloodshot, his eyes watched the progress through the fog of his own breath. He did not care about the smell of ozone or the sparks flying from the floor. "Take it all," he yelled, his voice cracking with greed. "Carry my rot into the dark. Die so I can be pure. Give me my seat. I want that gold." On the wall, the promotion meter began its final crawl. 99.1%, 99.5%, 99.8%. From their velvet chairs, the elite stood up. They raised crystal glasses high, their eyes fixed on the numbers. Breathing became a struggle as the room filled with the scent of burning nerves. Thorne's hands shook on the desk. He was close. He could taste the power. He could see the gates of the white zone opening for him. At 99.9%, the floor groaned. From inside the walls came a deep, heavy thud. The earth itself seemed to move. The fans high above slowed to a crawl, then stopped. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The gold bar stopped. It flickered. It turned a sick, oily green. Across every screen in the hall, a red warning light flashed. The glare hit the faces of the rich people and turned them into masks of blood. Asset upload stalled, data not clear. Thorne's face went white. Again, he hit the button. With his closed fist, he smashed the console over and over. He screamed at the machine, his spit hitting the glass. "Move! Work!" he screamed. "It is just a glitch. Caelen, you trash. Take the rest. Open your head and take it. I do not care if your brain melts. Just take it." Still and silent, Caelen lay in the salt. He was no longer shaking. His eyes were wide. The black mercury was moving again. It was not leaking out of him. It was flowing back in. He was drinking the dark. His chest rose and fell in a slow, heavy rhythm. The needles in his spine were glowing. They hummed with a frequency that made the glass in the room vibrate. The industrial salt around his body began to turn black, soaking up the overflow. "Why are you not dead?" Thorne's voice was high and sharp. "You should be a husk. You should be empty. Why is the system flagging a syndet? It is a mistake. You are just a defective tool. You are a broken bucket." Caelen did not speak. He moved his head. The motion was slow and smooth. Predatory intent burned in his eyes. He reached up and grabbed Thorne's white ceramic boot, the one still pinning his shattered hand to the iron grate. With his broken fingers, Caelen began to squeeze. The boot did not hold. Up the side of the ceramic shot a hairline fracture. Crack. Snap. Pieces of the white material fell into the salt. "You dare touch me," Thorne hissed. But the ice in his voice was gone. Only fear remained. He looked at the screen. The gold was gone. The whole monitor was turning black. The system code began to rewrite itself in front of his eyes. Resonance found. The sink is full. The sink is pushing back. From the deck, a boy watched the wine in his glass. The red liquid started to spin in a tiny circle. Then it jumped out of the glass, splashing onto his silk shirt. "That is not a transfer," the boy whispered. "That is a bridge. It is a two-way street." Thorne froze. He tried to pull his foot away. He could not move. Caelen's grip was an industrial vice locking onto the ankle. Through the black oil and the wires in his head, Caelen finally spoke. His voice was a dry rasp, the sound of stones grinding together in the dark. "You called this storage, did you not, Thorne?" The red light got brighter. The gold bars on the wall shattered into dust. The words "High Architect" were wiped away by the red glare. Now there were only the old laws, the laws of blood, the laws of debt. The Aegis system beeped once, a long, mournful sound. "Storage fees," Caelen said. A single blue spark lit up in the center of his black eyes. Time to pay up. Thorne's heart hit his ribs like a drum. He was a cornered dog. He hit the desk, trying to cut the wire, trying to find a knife, trying to find anything to save himself. He looked at the guards, but they were backing away. They saw the blue fire in Caelen's eyes. The desk did not listen to Thorne. The screen changed to one word in big black letters that bled down the glass. Debt. Forward lunged Thorne, his hands clawing at the cold steel handle of the emergency lever. Panic drove every movement now. With a desperate grunt, he slammed the handle down. No needles popped out of Caelen's spine. No link broke. Instead, a violet bolt jumped from the console and struck Thorne in the chest. Backward he flew, his body hitting the reinforced glass wall with a sickening thud. His white suit scorched. The smell of burnt meat filled the small booth. Deep into Caelen's bone bit the needles, locking into place with a mechanical hiss. Error. Lock on. The voided valve is open. What did you do? Thorne yelled. Scrambling to his feet, he wiped red sweat and dirt from his eyes. He smashed his fist against the screen. Aegis, cut the link, shut him down. This is my system, this is my sector. I order you to stop. From the floor came the voice of the machine. It did not use the speakers. It vibrated through the pipes and the walls. Deep and heavy, it made the industrial salt on the ground jump in rhythmic waves. Stay still, debtor. Analyzing sin debt. You lied, Thorne. Storage time is over. The bucket is turning over. Pay now. Pay? Thorne's breath stopped. He looked at his own shaking hands. Grey, dead skin spread across his knuckles. Thin black lines grew under his fingernails. The filth was coming home. No, Thorne screamed. It was a legal loop. I checked the codes in section 404. This is not real. You cannot do this to me. Real or not, the debt remains, Caelen said. He stood up. Slow and wrong, the motion defied the laws of a broken back. Caelen rose. The magnetic locks on his legs snapped. High-pitched cracks echoed. Out of the salt pool he walked, his footsteps heavy and final. Blue fire burned across his skin, eating the very air around him. Forward reached Caelen's hand, grabbing the empty air. In the neural link, Thorne's heart felt the squeeze. You did not want to pay the tax for your sins, Caelen rasped. A choir of 1,000 screaming men seemed to fill his voice. You thought you could dump your trash in my head and keep the gold for yourself. You thought I was a hole that never filled up. But the world wants its balance, and the system wants its liar. Laughter no longer came from the deck. Wine glasses sat empty on the floor. With soft white fists, the elites hit the exit doors. They scratched at the glass until their nails bled. Locked stayed the shield. Thorne's own security wall was now their cage. Trapped they were with the monster they had spent a lifetime feeding. One man threw a chair at the glass, but it merely bounced away. Red light turned their expensive suits into the color of dried, crusty blood. Terror filled their eyes as the system began tracing their own debts. Starting recall. 10 years of unpaid sin. Adding agony interest. The gold bar on the wall shattered into 1,000,000 digital shards. A new meter grew in its place. Black and cold, it occupied every screen in the abrasion zone. Thorne load. 10%. 30%. 60%. 90%. Thorne made a high, thin whistle of air. His skin started to boil. Small, angry bubbles formed on his neck. No black mercury leaked out this time. It erupted from his pores in oily sprays, ruining his silk robes and staining his skin forever. White as a bone turned his left eye. His right eye pushed out of his head, bulging with the pressure of 1,000 repressed nightmares. He was becoming the physical sum of his own lies. Stop, Thorne begged. He fell to his knees on the same iron grate where he had crushed Caelen's hand. The metal bit into his skin. I will give you gold. I will give you my seat in the white zone. I will give you my name. Just take it back. Put it back in the bucket. Please. Over him stood Caelen, a tower of shadow. Blue flames licked the ceiling. Caelen looked down at the man who had used him as a trash can for a decade. The bucket is full, Thorne, Caelen whispered. Sharp and cold, his voice was the last thing Thorne would ever hear clearly. Drink every drop. Ice turned the air to fire. The final surge hit. Total system failure hit the core. No longer did Aegis transfer data. It executed the debtor from the center of his soul. Thorne's mind disintegrated. Into the back of his head rolled his eyes, showing only the red glare of the debt screen. Every person he had ever crushed, every worker he had starved to keep his stats pure, and every lie he had ever told rushed back into his skull. 100 years of concentrated agony hit him in a single heartbeat. This was no memory. This was a physical execution. He felt the cold of the winter streets. He felt the hunger of the dying. He felt the sting of the needles in his own back, over and over again. His body twisted in ways no man should move. Symmetry vanished, shriveled until it was just bone and grey skin. His left arm died. Swelling with the pressure of 1,000 repressed rages, his right arm tore open. Boiling oil flowed where his blood used to be. On the floor he crawled, a broken thing dragging through black mercury and his own vomit. He was no longer an inspector. Thorne was now a rat. He clawed at Caelen's shadow with fingers that had no nails left. "Help me," Thorne wheezed. Dry glass seemed to break in his throat. "Filter it, just a little. I will give you the keys to section 404. I will give you the whole zone. Please, I will make you a king. I will make you a god." Caelen did not move. He did not blink. He watched Thorne's mind melt with the cold detachment of a machine. Up on the deck, the elite stopped laughing. Silence fell. They turned pale. The debt recall was spreading. The system was tracing every drop of rot in the room back to its origin. One by one, the rich men and women in their clean suits began to scream. They clutched their heads. Their own secrets turned into hot lead in their brains. Black turned the wine in their glasses. Smoke rose from the silk on their backs. Deep purple turned the walls of the abrasion zone. The air itself began to scream as the cooling pipes exploded. Frozen metal shards flew through the hall. The machines roared as the sin debt hit its peak. 100%. Total debt recalled. Subject Thorne is permanently corrupted. Trash has been returned to the origin. One last, long howl left Thorne's throat before ending in a wet gurgle. His mind snapped. Against the base of the cooling pipes he slumped, his eyes wide open and staring at a world that no longer existed for him. He was still breathing, but Thorne was gone. He was a meat shell. He was a biological waste bin, trapped in a loop of his own darkness forever. He would spend eternity feeling every ounce of the pain he tried to give away. Caelen reached up to his neck. Out came the neural needles from his spine. One by one, pop, pop, pop. The sound was a cork leaving a bottle of sour wine. No pain came this time. Only a cold, clear light filled his head. For the first time in 10 years, his nervous system belonged entirely to him. He could feel his own toes. He could feel the air on his skin. He was the master of his own nerves. Over the broken pile of robes and meat he stepped. He did not look back. He did not offer a final word of revenge. Revenge was a human emotion, and Caelen had moved far beyond that. He was now the only being in the world who could walk through the filth and stay clean. He was taking that power and leaving this cage behind. Above him, the lights of the white zone began to die. The big shield was failing. Without a grounder to hold their rot, the city of the elite was falling apart. The rich were finally meeting the monsters they had spent a lifetime creating. Into the grey mud of the wasteland leaned the ivory towers. The screams of the dying paradise filled the air. Caelen walked toward the heavy steel blast doors of Sector 0. As he got close, the Aegis system did not try to stop him. It did not flash red. With a heavy, respectful thud that shook the floor, the locks turned. The lights on the door turned green. The machine knew the new authority. It did not need a title. It felt the weight of a soul that had survived the very bottom of the world and come back with the fire. He pushed the final door open. The freezing grey wind of the wasteland rushed in, catching his tattered rags. It was cold, it was harsh, but it was honest. Ahead of him lay the ruins of the old world, a landscape of shadows, ghosts, and the open road. Caelen stepped out into the dark. Behind him, the screams of the elite filled the halls of the White Zone. But he did not hear them. He did not care. He was already gone. He was no longer a carrier. He was no longer a slave. He was no longer a ghost. He was the silence after the storm.
Watching Thorne choke on 100 years of his own recycled lies is the ultimate digital karma. He literally became the human trash can he spent a decade looking down on. If you had a secret button that could dump your worst mistakes into someone else to buy yourself 10 years of absolute luxury, honestly, could you really resist pressing it? Between us, I originally planned to have Caelen end him right there, but leaving Thorne alive and trapped in a perpetual loop of his own misery felt like a much more poetic glitch in the system.